So Ukrainian ban on Russian social networks kicks in. This is part of the wide set of expanding sanctions against Russian companies in relation to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. By signing this decree, President Poroshenko has banned the use of very popular Russian social networks Vkontakte and Odnoklassniki, the email service mail.ru, on which I once used to have my email address, and the search engine company Yandex. All four are in the top 10 most popular websites in Ukraine. The decree by Petro Poroshenko includes more than 400 companies and more than 1,200 people.
Vkontakte, Yandex, and Odnoklassniki will be banned in Ukraine. These companies feature on the list of almost 500 businesses, foundations, and organizations sanctioned by the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. The Ukrainian President, Petro Poroshenko, signed this decree on May 15th. These sanctions will affect a number of Russian TV channels, banks, airlines, charitable organizations, as well as separatist organizations and battalions. The sanctions are set to last for a period of 1 to 3 years. Antivirus software companies Kaspersky Lab and Dr. Web are also on the list, as well as the business management software 1C. Most Ukrainian organizations use this software for accounting and management. 16 million Ukrainians use Vkontakte every month. Around 10 million Ukrainians use the search engine Yandex every month, not including mobile users. Ukraine is now among 30 other countries that have banned certain social networks. 1,228 Russian, Ukrainian, and foreign citizens are affected by the list of sanctions, including the singer Yosif Kobzon, the ex-Ukrainian MP Oleg Tsaryov, soldiers Igor Girkin and Igor Bezler, and head of the online publication Ukraina.ru, Olyena Berezovska. Companies and people included on the sanctions list, according to the National Security and Defense Council, are threats to the internet and cybersecurity of Ukraine.
So the video explaining the size, the scope of the ban fails to show the protest meetings, rallies that started almost immediately after the publication. And I have the honor and pleasure to introduce to you our special guest tonight. This is Artem Bidenko, the State Secretary of the Ministry of Ukraine for Information Policy, and Maksym Tulyev, board member of the Ukrainian Internet Associations. And I suspect that they have conflicting views on the issue, or am I trying to influence you? Who's going to start? A general evaluation of the act by the president. Well, Mr. Bidenko.
For our ministry, this decision doesn't include any conflict, because we don't see the world as only white and only black. We understand that there is a very thin border between censorship and informational security or even national security. And for us today, the challenge is not to quarrel about if this ban is needed or not. For us, it is understood that this is absolutely normal to ban resources which control Ukrainian citizens, which help control Ukrainian citizens by Russian FSB. So,
what about the American CIA?
There are no real evidence that social networks like Facebook are controlled by CIA.
But there is an allegation published recently that FSB through Facebook tried to influence the Brexit campaign and the campaign of President Trump in America.
That's a very good case, because in today's or yesterday's Washington Post there was an opinion article about what measures Facebook will do to avoid control and also to avoid being a weapon, informational weapon. And a lot was written about French elections, American elections, and Facebook shows that it is open and transparent for decisions that help not overgo this thin border between censorship, influence, and security.
Has the Ukrainian government addressed the social networks and other companies mentioned in the sanctions list with an appeal to try to do something like, for instance, the Facebook does?
Our ministry wrote a letter in February this year to contact, I don't remember, Odnoklassniki, it seems for me, we didn't wrote to them, to contact asking to close publics of separatists. And we had no answer. And vice versa, we have contact with Facebook. Previous week, our Deputy Minister, Dmitry Zolotukhin, was on big conference where he again met with Central Europe Director, Gabriela Czech, and they had very good dialogue about what should be done for Facebook to be more transparent and less influenced by separatist, terrorist, or pro-Russian groups.
Artem Bidenko, the State Secretary of the Ministry of Information, will be coming back to you shortly. Maksym Tulyev, board member at the Ukrainian Internet Association. What's the take of your organization, or maybe your personal take on the situation?
For my personal take, I would bet you $100 that Facebook will be banned in 1 year in Ukraine.
Okay.
The big problem is not ban of Kontakte or Odnoklassniki. I believe it's general good idea, but how can it be done? When we do some ban, the first website in Ukraine, we opening a big can of worms. So the price of this blockage is much higher than the effect it can be reached. At first, we have to build censorship infrastructure. Like all operators and providers in Ukraine should buy some equipment, install it, set it up, begin to interact with some kind of Roskomnadzor kind company. I think it will be your agency. And after that, after some time of maybe 1 year, it will work as expected. So right now, several internet operators and telecom operators in Ukraine banned Kontakte and Mail.ru just by blocking the network ranges of these companies. So a lot of websites, lot of web projects that are not in sanction list was banned. So to make a precision banning, there is equipment, there is infrastructure, there is interaction with government agencies, so what we have in Russia. I believe it's not good idea to get this instrument to Ukrainian government persons that are, we know, very clean and very honest. So there is no corruption, no protectionism. So it's very good idea to give these instruments. So we actually.
If we are talking about Ukrainian government officials, and one of them we have in the studio, but we go to a higher level, pardon me for saying this,
okay.
Mr. Bidenko, here's what Alexander Turchinov, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, told the nation regarding the new internet ban. And mind you, the National Council for Security and Defense is viewed as initiators of the controversial presidential decree. Let's listen what Mr. Turchinov said. First of all, these networks were used on the one hand to illegally gather the information. On the other hand, the information warfare against our country is performed via them. They're used for brutal propaganda. And they were even used for the recruitment of the network of agents by Russian special services. And there are a lot of other issues with them. We are a European country. We basically have a visa-free regime with Europe, and surely we have to limit options to use pirated content, especially with the use of aggressive information networks, such as Russian social networks. So this is the opinion of one of the people in the country who are regarded as shapers of the policy in the sphere of information security in particular. And, but my question is rather personal. Have you discussed in social networks the controversial decree? Mr. Bidenko goes first.
The discussion began in December last year.
For you personally?
Yes, for us personally also, because a group of members of parliament suggested 2 or 3 law drafts on such a ban. And it was even a public discussion by these members of parliament about, and even some quarrel between opponents of this idea and those who are for this idea. In February, we had even our ministry was interfered in this quarrel. So for us, there was a discussion, and we saw numbers that 75% of people. This is not a sociological survey, but around 75% of people in country, they are for such ban, but they are against censorship.
People who take part in social networks.
Yes, sure, mostly in social media. But these people are against censorship, and we should understand there is a huge difference between what is done in Russia or China, for example, and what is done in Ukraine, which has a lot of the same as it is in Canada or, for example, in Germany.
So it's normal in abnormal situations. What's the opinion of the man from the Internet Association?
Of course, I disagree with you because of even.
Of course, I disagree. So
Even
you don't even have to listen to your opponent.
In United States, the network neutrality is the primary freedom of network. Even in Israel, which is a country doing war or anti-terroristic operation, every time from the founding of this country, the freedom of internet is the basic things, and they denied to ban any website technically. So, okay, there is responsibility for illegal activity in the web, but there is no technical possible, no this equipment, no this infrastructure to ban any website by network operators.
We have a sequence of tweets from social networks and from different sites. Of course, the debate rages online. That's why I asked you whether you took part in online discussions. So let's see. When will Ukraine learn that emulating Russia's repression is no way to distinguish itself from Russia, wrote an executive director of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Ross. And he added, if Ukraine wants global support, it should revoke decree flouting global standards to bar Russian social media. Reporters Without Borders, a rather authoritative international organization, stated that nothing can justify such a blanket ban. Daniel Holdgen, director of communications at the Council of Europe, tweeted, blocking social media goes against our common understanding of freedom of expression proportionality. On the other hand, Yevhen Fedchenko, who is the director of the Kyiv-Mohyla School of Journalism, said that if #Ukraine implement this would be the greatest contribution to protection of information sovereignty of Ukraine, ever right and timely, says Mr. Fedchenko. Knowing Yevhen as a very fierce adherent of the freedom of speech, I think that he had to think over this quite seriously before he published such a tweet. Earlier, we spoke to experts to gather their opinion. How efficient is this ban? Because from earlier interviews of Mr. Bidenko, I remember his phrase that this is a fight against the danger which rose in the 21st century by using the 20th century means. So about how efficient this ban is, and we spoke to Freedom House Ukraine's project director Matthew Schaaf, to Vitaly Moroz, head of new media at Internews Ukraine, Svetlana Matvienko, media and information war researcher, and Russian independent journalist Irina Borogan, author of the investigation the Red Web, the struggle between Russia's digital dictators and the new online revolutionaries. We'll come back to discussion with our studio guests after we watch those sound bites.
President's decree to ban Russian social networks and email services is a continuation of the government policy to block activities of Russian companies in Ukraine. So first of all, it is a step against Russian businesses who make profit of Ukrainian citizens. But on the other hand, it's a restriction of access of Ukrainian citizens to Russian social networks. All Russian propaganda messages or fakes are disseminated through social media, and we know that Russia employs factories of trolls, so they spread this information more intensively, so they target Ukrainian users as well. Ukrainian government should better have explained this decree, but it is partly justified. Because Russian aggression continues for 3 years, and Ukrainian government considered these steps back in 2014.
Freedom House and other organizations are concerned about the tendency of Ukrainian government to block information, block access to resources, to websites, and so on. Because we think that it will make it more difficult for people to access information, news, to express themselves. As far as we've seen so far, this decision wasn't made in a way that's consistent with the expectations in a democratic society.
I see this decision more tactical than strategic. Although I'm sure that Ukrainian government considered it a strategic decision, certain contribution in the future, and etc. However, I think it's more tactical because it affects just the current situation, and this tactics is more symbolic than practical. It means that they can, share themselves on social media, the fact that they're actually doing something, but in fact, there are so many means to avoid this control and this blocking, and all those means are pretty familiar to people, especially on the territories like Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and etc. So that's why I think there will be so many ways to avoid the blocking.
But in 2012, after the Arab Spring, and then especially after the Moscow protest in 2011-2012, the Kremlin implemented the internet filtering and so-called blacklist on the internet in Russia. And since then, we have internet censorship in the country. The mechanism of this internet censorship is very simple. A special censorship agency called Roskomnadzor implemented a special blacklists of banned websites that include a lot of more than a million websites started with, information about suicide and child pornography, and ended with information about extremism, that according to the Russian law means all information independent from the Kremlin. I completely disagree that social networks could be a tool of propaganda or of somebody or something, because the social network is horizontal structures, and information on social network is sharing and posted uncontrollable, because there is no hierarchical structure, as Kremlin also thinks. And the Kremlin tried to suppress social networks from the top many times when the war in Ukraine started, and the Russian authorities strongly denied the military presence of Russian army on the ground. The social network of Kontakte became the first proof that Kremlin lied, because a lot of Russian soldiers started posting a lot of information about their units, their photographs, and this was the first proof that Russian army are on the ground, and the social network helps.
So we're back to the studio of the Sunday Show, and I would like to ask Mr. Tulyev of the Ukrainian Internet Association to be the first to comment on what you just saw and heard.
Yes, I would like to comment about how this ban is legal. First of all, Defense Council that issued this ban by the Article 10 of the law about this council. This decision is mandatory only for state structures, not for private person or commercial person, as most of internet operators and providers are. The second is by a lot of other laws. Any ban can be done only based on court decision, which is not done now. So the problem is this illegal decision, in fact, is implemented because of most of all main operators, main telecom operators already banned these resources. So for me, it means only one. We should take screwdriver, go to the Bankova Street, famous building, screw out this table displayed with President of Ukraine, and screw up new table, Tsar, because of illegal decision, in fact, is implemented.
Thank you very much. Artem Bidenko, State Secretary of the Information Ministry.
That's a manipulation of facts because censorship is blocking and banning of content. And the decision of National Security and Defense Council doesn't block content. You can read opposition, critics anywhere. You can watch on TV. The resources which are threat for national security are banned. These resources are owned by the country which kills Ukrainian citizens. And that's a problem in this discussion, because the manipulation is going to the questions of censorship, and we're trying to show the thin border, and that the challenge today is also not to go further, but to stop and understand what is the difference between just sites, just resources, and words, articles, discussion. That is challenge today, not quarreling about if we need this ban or we not. We do need stopping Russian information attack on Ukraine. How can we do it? How can we do it if we don't stop the most popular resources in Ukraine?
A final remark from Mr.
Another
Tulyev.
argument, this is economical sanctions. Today, you said on the beginning of our program that all these sites, all these resources are on the top 10 of Ukrainian top sites. Why don't we help maybe some protectionism, Ukrainian companies be on the top, get this money for internet advertising and so on and so forth? Why we give this money to Russians? Can you tell me?
So the question was and is why you didn't do it legal way, by the court decision?
It is legal way. The decision
it's not legal way.
By the way,
It
when
is
you
legal,
say
absolutely.
you, I presume you mean the state structures, not Mr.
Like
Bidenko,
officials.
his information ministry, because they do not have a part in this. Am I right?
Not you,
Yes.
but government, of course. So
Yeah.
there is legal way. It's possible to do it legal way, but it was done by crying illegal way.
It
Why?
is legal way after the decision of Council, National Security Council. The other officials, government bodies, will suggest law drafts, other documents which help implementing this decision.
But it's
This
done
is
right now.
normal.
Okay.
But there are no threats for providers or citizens to overcome this ban, for example.
Right now, the illegal decree of this Committee for Defense, in fact, is implemented.
Your words will be true after you show me the first fine for not doing this.
Okay. My last question, and I'd like to require a very brief answers from both of you, is wouldn't you think that the appeal to Ukrainians to stop using social networks, bad social networks like Odnoklassniki and Vkontakte, would have more actual effect than this this attempt to ban it in legal form. Mr. Bidenko.
Unfortunately, no.
No.
3 years ago, there was such an appeal, a lot of appeals from different public leaders, and still we see these social networks are very popular. Moreover, we had 2 decrees which banned officials from using Mail.ru, and still
They still
we
do
had
it.
a lot of officials, especially in regions, who had their emails, Mail.ru emails and Yandex.ru emails.
Okay.
So this was the only way to solve this situation.
I get your point, Mr. Tulyev.
How this official was punished for using Mail.ru mail account?
You can't punish people for using in their private life. That means
They
democracy.
use it in work.
Yeah,
I got my company got request from Cyberpolice of Dnipropetrovsk, for example, was written from Mail.ru account. They use
Yeah, and that's what Mr.
That's what I'm
Bidenko
telling you.
said.
because nobody punished
That's a
it.
My
problem.
question was, and I got the answer from the state official, now the answer from the public activist.
I believe yes, it's possible because that's not only some kind of statement from Ukrainian government person. It should be a big advertising company. It should be good alternatives. So it's a big process. It costs money, of course.